Hello and welcome to this week's Politics Today, and in this programme we shall be discussing how our Prime Minister and our government is rapidly turning against Israel and trying to stop Israel from defending itself against the terrorist organisation that is Hamas. And to assess British foreign policy to Israel, I'm joined today by Melanie Symonds, who is the editor of the Christian newspaper Heart newspaper, together with Alistair Scott from Vision for Israel. So welcome to the programme. Melanie, very exciting news for our viewers because you have a new edition of Heart newspaper, the June-July edition, hot off the press. So share with us some of the highlights that our viewers can expect from this edition of Heart newspaper.
Well, thank you, Simon. This might be the only time this programme that I actually smile. I'm quite pleased with the new paper, actually. The headline is The Quiet Revival, which is the title of the Bible Society's recent survey, showing that we've got lots of young people attending church now, particularly young men. It's all exciting. That's the lead story, and I'm very encouraged by that. And then we've got a wonderful testimony in the middle of actually a Revelation viewer who contacted me when I was doing our mornings, and he has an amazing testimony, and he's forgiven his abusers. And then we've got a super article by Philip Quenby, who's written an amazing book on prayer, which really is good, actually. It sort of says, wow. I mean, I hope viewers actually go after this book. It's very full of everything.
Absolutely. And you have got an article about Lord Nelson.
Oh, that's the Philip Quenby one. Yes, that's England Expects, because Nelson's one of his heroes. Do you know, it's so sad. I looked at this picture of Nelson's mast saying England Expect the signal. I just burst into tears because I've done that more than once when I look at that article and think about it and what we've turned into.
Yeah, great man. Admiral Nelson, real maverick, but an absolute genius at the same time. And Alistair, thank you so much for stepping in to do the programme at such short notice, so really appreciate that. Can you just give us, I know you do great work now on Revelation TV in your own right, doing a great job with Persecuted Church and Prayer Time Live, but share with us your other hats, particularly the work you're doing through Vision for Israel.
Vision for Israel it's probably the busiest time ever for them because there are so many needs. And I think the biggest challenge for us now, and we're going to talk about this more and more, is actually getting the truth into the nations, because social media, the TV programs, news programs are so anti-Israel that it's quite difficult now to stand up. You have to be courageous. You have to have that Joshua spirit about you to stand up and talk what is truth and remind. I mean, I spoke about this a couple of days ago, that, you know, we don't stand with Israel for political reasons, we don't stand for geographical reasons, we stand for biblical reasons. And that's the truth of Vision for Israel. Joseph Storehouse, as we're called in here, is bringing the truth of what the Bible says. You know, he talks about everlasting covenants. He will never change his mind. And if he changes his mind about Israel, he could well change his mind about me. So I'd rather believe he's a God who never changes his mind. So yeah, the challenge is, of course, the domestic needs, providing for families who are displaced, for children. I mean, one of the things, I spoke to Barrett just a couple of days ago, and he was saying one of the biggest problems is now trauma amongst kids. One of his own grandchildren that he talked about suddenly burst into tears. You know, this is a really strong boy, because they are living with this trauma and sirens going. They don't get sleep because they can be down in the shelters. And he was saying it's the biggest challenge amongst young people is the trauma that they're experiencing as a result of being at war for nearly 2 years now. The time's going by so quick. And it's constant, the threats of missile attacks, ballistic attacks from the Houthis in Yemen, or Iran threatening what they threaten. And just the way the media comes against Israel generally, you know, even the IDF soldiers fighting in the front line, they need so much encouragement and prayer. Because, you know, they hear the news, they hear the way the world is talking against them, and, you know, we're talking about that specifically today.
Exactly, this is why Israelis are not travelling very much. No. And Israelis are great travellers as well, because of that threat of Jew hatred, that threat of being attacked and abuse as well. So we will be touching on those aspects later in the programme. But Melanie, would you give your thoughts on the video statement made by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last week? And this is what he said. He says, "I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. and you're on the wrong side of history. And the context of this is the incredible condemnation by the British government on Israel for her military operations to destroy Hamas and bring her hostages home. Give us your thoughts on how the Israeli Prime Minister has actually called out Keir Starmer and his foreign policy towards Israel, which is shocking.
Well, I was pleased that Prime Minister Netanyahu responded strongly. He used very plain language, which I'm sure goes down very well in Israel. I do wonder if people here actually hear it. I think it kind of might just go over their heads, but it had to be said. And he said what was what. And I was so horrified when I heard those statements last Tuesday. I actually emailed the Israeli embassy to apologise, and I said this is not the view of everyone in the country, and how ashamed I was. And I emailed my MP as well, and I asked him, could you ask our military how they would deal with hardened terrorists who refuse to release hostages? Because you look back at the where we've confronted this kind of thing. I mean, we went to war, of course, in Iraq and Libya without much excuse that they hadn't directly attacked us. But look at the Iranian embassy siege. Did we negotiate with those poor terrorists who are holding people captive? No. We sent the SAS in. Nor, I mean, if we had Israel criticising us for our mistakes, where would we be? Exactly. But I think Israel is very forbearing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, share with us how we're seeing this increasing hostility on behalf of this Labour government towards Israel. And the fact is now, for example, Starmer has actually been called out, as I said, by the Israeli Prime Minister in reference that the Israeli Prime Minister actually believes he's siding with Hamas, because this also follows the murder of 2 young Israeli diplomats outside the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. last week, where we saw that the murderer, who was a left-wing terrorist who believed and supported the Black Lives Matter protest, became obsessed with Hamas, actually carried out cold-blooded murder on the streets of Washington, D.C., where he said he did it for Gaza and free Palestine. So share with us how, for example, the Prime Minister's rhetoric is not helping this climate of demonisation and hatred of Israel and the Jewish people, and this climate of Jew hatred that has literally become a pandemic ever since October 2023, when Israel suffered the worst mass terrorist attack in its history.
It's amazing, isn't it, how quickly people forget what happened on October 7th and justify what happened because they talk about being in captivity and being under oppression, which is absolute nonsense. I mean, when you're in Israel, you see that the Islamic people, who call them Palestinians, or people from that background, thrive if they live as part of the society. But what's happening with our government, it's rapidly changing. You know, we knew in the past that the Labour Party were fairly anti-Semitic in its thinking, but suddenly the leadership
certain elements within the party, like
within
Jeremy
the party,
Corbyn, I don't think we can whitewash the whole entire party.
No, but it was there, wasn't it? It was underlying, and in theory, Starmer was sort of separating him from that past thinking and talking very, very, when they got elected, very, very positively about Israel, and so quickly over the last few months. And the worrying thing is that if you watch news media, the general BBC News, Sky News, ITN News, all those sort of things, and most of the nation, most people watch that rather than social media, unless you are under 15 or something. You are affected by what you see, and there's a lot of these news broadcasts that are coming out at the moment. They are false, they're fake news, they are old film being used as if it's happening today. You know, all these accusations about children and babies and all this sort of stuff. Now, every life matters, and even if there's one person who killed, it matters. But as a government, to make the statements that have been made recently, siding with Hamas, it's more or less giving them a license to do what they do, and coming against our ally. Israel has been an ally for decades, and making them feel like they need to be responsible or ashamed of what they're doing. They are trying to clear Gaza from the Hamas terrorist organization. And of course there's going to be death, of course there's going to be people killed, and we hate for those things to happen. We hate the destruction we see, but it's a major battle and they have to win it. And I was very pleased to hear what Kemi Badenoch had to say over the weekend. She was almost quoting the Bible, you know, I will bless those who bless you and those who curse you will be cursed. I am concerned, and I need to highlight that to everyone who's watching. We need to pray for our nation to stand on God's side, and God doesn't have sides as such, but you know what he blesses, he promised us to bless, he will bless. So we need to be praying for a change of the heart of the government, or a change of the leaders of the government.
Absolutely.
It's quite a tough one.
God does have a foreign policy, and that is, if you bless his nation Israel, we'll be blessed, but if we curse his nation, we'll be cursed. Genesis 12, 1-3. I will finish on that. Melanie, I mean, there is now a real crisis in British-Israeli relations, and prior to the vile and evil and hideous murder of those two young Israeli diplomats who are both Messianic Jewish believers, and they were due to fly to Israel to get married, and they've had their whole life just taken away from them. And this is what our Prime Minister Keir Starmer said before they were horrifically gunned down. He said that he was horrified by Israel's actions, saying these utterly inadequate amount of aid had been let into Gaza. Share with us how this rhetoric is contributing to this increased climate of hatred that the Jewish people feel now. And now we're seeing that hatred literally just spill onto our streets, where Israeli diplomats now are being targeted, or even their lives being threatened, because of rhetoric from the media, from our politicians, without knowing this is adding to this climate of hate that we're seeing directed against Israel, and this demonisation of Israel.
It's been building up since October the 7th. As soon as the marches started, almost immediately, it's just unbelievable. And we're now starting to see the fruit of that. But what really concerns me is, yes, we heard what Keir Starmer said. He's clearly getting advice from the Foreign Office. He's not getting advice from Israel. In fact, I was horrified when he called in the ambassador, Tsipi Hotovely, to reprimand. What a nerve. And I'm pleased to see the other day she had an article in the Telegraph and started, putting the record straight. So we have some media like GB News, the Telegraph, the Spectator to some extent, which still stand with Israel, at least try to see things fairly. And the government should be setting the tone, and the government shouldn't be almost following the BBC and almost parroting them. When I wrote to my MP, I said, I suppose you're just trying to please your Gaza MPs. They've got 5 of them.
That's true.
We've now got a Muslim mayor of Rotherham, one of Brighton, and I think somewhere else. I won't say where else, I think. But they are trying to appease that constituency, and I think, and they should realise that it's a big mistake to try and do that. And it won't stop things kicking off here at all. And what horrified me also about that gunning down of the 2 young people, I mean, it was the day after Starmer had spoken. So on Monday we had him ceding control of our armed forces to the EU. Now, Brexit was all about getting away from Europe, not being part of whatever they're going to do when they come against Israel. In fact, we reprinted an article in the paper, a Brexit article by Clifford Hill from 2019, saying how important it was for Britain to be a separate island. And so on Monday, he ceded control of our armed forces to the EU. On Tuesday, he stood up against Israel. On Wednesday, that young couple were gunned down. And what horrifies me, and I'm sure you've both seen this over the years, is that Israel criticism reaches a kind of crescendo, and then there's some horror, some atrocity. There's the shedding of innocent Jewish blood, and that shuts them up for a bit.
Yeah, but it's disgraceful has to get to that in order for them to realise the consequences of their rhetoric. I mean, for example, this you can't actually make this up, because the current UK government has actually responded to a documentary made by Louis Theroux, which was produced by the BBC, and he chose the most extreme of all the Jewish settlers to follow. And now, as a direct response of that, the British government now has adopted a policy where they want to pause free trade negotiations with Israel with immediate effect, saying it's not possible to advance discussions with the Netanyahu government that is pursuing egregious policies in the West Bank and Gaza, and showed us how not only is this damaging British-Israeli relations, but also this is damaging the spiritual health and the well-being of our nation, because we are clearly heading for a curse, because this nation is determined to curse Israel.
We had a prayer meeting on that very morning or the morning after he had spoken. And I remember saying to people, you know, we really need to pray for our nation, because when the government speaks things out like they do, it's not only fulfilling the word from Genesis 12:1-3, you know, you bring a curse on your nation because you're cursing God's chosen people. But more than that, it gives a license to those people who are so anti-Israel to do whatever they like. And the very next day, that same evening, there was the gunning down of the two Jewish believers. They were both Messianic believers too. One was, you know, it happened that very same evening, and I was thinking, this is the problem. You know, we are talking about the security of the Jewish communities in our nation. When a government starts speaking pro-Hamas, if I dare to say that, or certainly pro the Palestinian, it means those many tens of thousands who come out in the streets think, yeah, even our government thinks we're doing the right thing, and of course they're not. We need to be really stopping these terrorist organizations, because we know there's cells in our nation, there's cells all around Europe, and they are thinking, this is great. The government of UK is standing with us and coming against Israel. So they're winning the media, the social media battle anyway, and we need to pray. We cannot allow it to happen. I'm so happy that you've already challenged your MP. We all need to do those things, and because there are many of the MPs who don't agree with the rhetoric that's coming out of the Foreign Ministry and our Parliament leaders. We need to be standing and encouraging people like Badenoch for standing up for the righteous truth, and really challenge every one of our MPs and our councillors. This is not the way. Encourage them and even quote the scriptures. They may not believe it, but you can sow a seed of what the Bible says. I will bless you if you bless my people. You know, our God is a covenant-keeping God. He's a promise-keeping God. And people need to hear it, even, you know, because faith comes from hearing. So even if they don't listen, if they're hearing it, you're planting that seed of faith within them and questioning their stance. And they need to stand on the side of righteousness.
It's really simple, and I'll just say it to our viewers in a nutshell. So the enemies of Israel are our enemies, and if our government sides with Israel's enemies, then this is woe betide us, because those same evil demonic forces will come after us. You're either on one side, the side of righteousness, the side of truth, the side of justice, or you're on the side of the Islamists. Make your choice, because our nation is in peril if you make the wrong choice. Melanie, I just want to bring up something else. So the BBC had a recent article, and I'm going to quote from this one, where they quoted an Israeli diplomatic source from the Israeli Foreign Ministry in response to the threat of sanctions and the suspension of trade talks with Israel. So this spokesman said, if due to anti-Israel obsession and domestic political considerations, the British government is willing to harm the British economy, that's their own prerogative. But show us how, for example, by singling out Israel, we are losing out on investment. We are losing out on innovation. We're even threatening our own national security, because we know that Israel has the best intelligence in the world, and we need this to defeat our enemies. But our government has to realise that Israel is our ally, not our enemy. And by empowering Israel's enemies like Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, this is effectively empowering the enemies against our nation, against everything that we stand for and represent. They oppose, and now this poses a national security threat to our own government.
Yes. I mean, my only hope in this is that there is a separation between the trade considerations and security, because we do need Israeli security, and I pray that our security services keep working with theirs. That's a prayer of mine for our security services. And thus far, I think we've been protected from a great deal. And we need to go on praying for them, like the would-be attack on the Israeli embassy recently by the Iranians, IRGC, or whichever band it was. We've been protected. But as for the economic side, we are shooting ourselves in the foot, because we'll be missing out on Israeli genius. All their inventions, Intel, all sorts of things, advance in the field of medicine.
Yep.
It's pure folly and it's stupidity, because if you're then going to align yourself with who, I mean, which Muslim nation is coming up with amazing products? Well, no idea. It was the Israelis who made the desert bloom. I mean, this is so short-sighted. So I just, they are, again, the Israelis have called a spade, and they've said it is domestic political considerations. It's short-term domestic considerations. And just going back to Sir Keir Starmer, on the day after the attacks, in fact, the next day or 2 days, it was a Thursday, I think, he said he stood with the Jewish community. Well, he could have fooled us, but he quickly changed his tune again. I mean,
I think the fruits, you look at the fruit it's producing, or you know that this government, in terms of its foreign policy, is showing nothing but kind of bad fruit, nothing but disdain. We see our Foreign Secretary David Lammy being incredibly anti-Israel on every opportunity he gets. And I'm just going to kind of give a historical breakdown for you, Alistair and Melanie as well. So we've seen that this government, ever since it was elected back in July 2024, who can believe it's not even a year yet, have pursued an anti-Israel foreign policy. Firstly, they suspended military arms sales to Israel. They also supported the International Criminal Court in The Hague to bring about prosecution for alleged war crimes against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defence Minister as well. This Parliament also has decided to actually give the international authority, and particularly UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief Works Agency, that so many of their employees committed the horrors and the mass terrorist attacks on October the 7th, an extra £35 million this year was suspended by the previous Conservative government. This government reinstated it. And from 2024 to 2025, the UK, this is according to the government's own website, has committed £129 million to the Palestinian Authority. This includes £10 million via the West Bank for the Palestinian Authority to pay the public sector salaries, and for UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, also includes £34 million for UNRWA, announced in July and December of 2024. Surely this is rewarding terrorism against Israel, and this is what Israel is so angry about, because clearly Israeli lives don't matter.
It absolutely is, and I think it was Melanie said earlier that in some ways I think the government is running scared because their reputation in less than a year, as you've just pointed out, is going down the plug hole, and they are trying to appease, I think that was the word you used, the Islamic vote that will possibly help them out if there is a disaster and then for the next election. So they are definitely looking at the population and thinking, yes, we have a vast number of potential voters in the Islamic community, less so for the Jewish thing. So they're doing things for political reasons, for trying to put a plaster over their reputation. But you know, biblically, they are taking the wrong road. They have to stand with our allies. As you just said, you know, technology-wise, we are dependent. Security-wise, we're dependent on Israel. And it's not because we want to be sort of bullied into doing it. It just makes logical sense to be a friend of the people who are producing things that we need and providing us with the security. And in a really world which is challenging day by day, changing day by day, wars and rumors of wars all over the place. We need to have the intelligence. We need to have the support. We need to be standing with Israel, not against them. Don't make them our enemy.
Yeah, well, less than 3 minutes left. So, Melanie, what do you make of the article that you sent me personally from Israel Today? And this is the headline it was published under. UK poured millions into aid programme linked to Hamas-controlled group. The Foreign Office has sent money to UNICEF, even though it knew the agency worked with Hamas-controlled Ministry of Social Development. Says the United Kingdom is one of the chief funders of Hamas. Israel's Channel 12 Weekend News was reported on Saturday night. While a great deal of the money comes from private donations, the so-called Muslim charities, the investigation revealed that the British government also funds the terror group. Admittedly, the money reaches Hamas indirectly via UNICEF, but the British Foreign Office is aware of the terror connection. as evidenced by the internal 2022 report. Hamas operates in the United Kingdom almost with impunity, as reported by Channel 12 journalists. And this is Omri Manif, noting that Israel's defense establishment refers to as the Hamas's financial capital in the West, and Britain is one of 3 leading countries in the world in the volume of donations flowing into it to Hamas. The others are Muslim countries, Manav noted. He said the fact that more than a quarter of non-state funding for the terrorist organisation comes from the British Isles. Shameful.
This is one worth sending to your MP. The article's freely available on the Israel Today site, and it's worth asking your MP about freedom of information requests which were refused by the British government back in I think it was 2022 or 23, about where the money was going. And the United Kingdom knew that the Hamas Ministry of Social Development was involved in this cash transfer program, that it was Hamas run. And it's the British government said in 2022 in a report, it identified this fact as a reputational risk that might reflect poorly on the country were it to be made public. And the people who made the reported this, the NGO Monitor, who investigated all of this, they said British officials appear more concerned about the UK's image than about the dangerous implications of lax counter-terror financing policy. So it's quite bonkers. We've got our security services working hard on one hand against terrorists, and then we are funding them, and we are funding the machinery of terrorism.
Absolutely. So, Alistair and Melanie, thank you so much for being my guests on this week's Politics Day. You've done a great job. Thank you so much. And I think what's concerning as well is clearly our government is heading in the wrong direction. It's diplomatically going against Israel with devastating spiritual consequences for our nation. So thank you for standing up and defending the truth. And I want to thank you for watching this program at home. It's absolutely imperative that our nation stands with Israel at this critical time in history, because if we don't, the enemies that are coming against Israel will come against our nation. We want our nation to be blessed, as it says in Genesis 12, 1-3, that I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. This government, if it continues the direction it's going, is heading for a big curse and a big crash. So thank you for watching Politics Today.